Welcome to another episode of Silvie and Didy React. I'm Silvie,
And I'm Diddy.
and today we're reacting to Taylor Lorenz, more specifically, Taylor Lorenz's take on the recent assassination of the CEO of United Health. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is a rather contentious uh, media persona. That's the word I'm looking for. And she's had some very extreme takes and done some extreme things. She worked with Washington Post and maybe working with Fox. There's some rumors that she got fired. But before we get into that, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Well, Diddy, you and I have talked briefly about the assassination off the air, and we're both kind of aware of that. But what you and maybe others have not been aware of are some of the hot takes that came following the assassination.
Yeah, I've been keeping track of the news here and there, right? So I knew that the assassination occurred. They have a suspect, Luigi Mangione.
Hmm.
I guess it, from what I've seen, that from headline, again, this is just like on Twitter, just scrolling headlines. It seems like there's some reasonable evidence that would su strongly suggest that he did it, but I guess, there hasn't been a court case and all of that yet. So,
The lawyer's
but
saying there's no
outside of
evidence.
that, outside of that, I haven't seen much. So I'm very curious to see what Taylor Lorenz's take is.
Right. Just to kind of prep it for you, she's commenting more so on the assassination, less on the assassin.
Okay.
So, we're going to watch a clip. It's about
Mhm.
6 minutes. We're going to stop it partway through, but this
Okay.
is somebody interviewing her and having her take on something she posted on X. And they provide a screenshot of that. So instead of digging through her X posts, we're just going to let you see it for yourself on the interview. And she speaks for herself. So this isn't somebody else saying, "Oh, this is what you said." She owns up to it. So without further ado,
Okay. Okay, so I'm pulling that up now,
sounds
and
good.
you see my screen correct?
Sure do.
Okay.
We wanted to bring Taylor on. She's been a friend of TMZ Live for a long, long time, and she is back with us. Taylor, welcome back to TMZ Live.
Thanks for having me.
So, talk to us about what's behind this. On its face, it looks like you're saying there should be open season on some of these CEOs.
Absolutely not. So let me just be super clear. No, we should not murder CEOs. No, we should not go around shooting people in the street. But I think what's really missing in all of these conversations is context. When you see the entire internet, left and right, united around one thing, and that is celebrating,
Oh, oh no.
Wait, here we
I
go.
hate
We
to say
got
it
it.
too, the death of a healthcare CEO, you have to ask why. And I don't think that has been discussed at all. There's no discussions of the systemic cruelty in our healthcare system or the fact that
My goodness.
Bum, bum, bum.
thousands of Americans die because CEOs like this one and others deny essential life-saving care to Americans. And I think that's
Hang with us, dear viewers. We're going to pause it really shortly after this comment.
Okay.
the real, that's where this anger is coming from. And of course, it feels like a victory. It feels like somebody stood up to this barbaric violence, which, again, we are not condoning murder here, okay? That is not the solution to this. But
About getting people
Pause.
talking, but I want to go back, Taylor, to that.
Okay.
So, first reaction to that part of it where she's saying, I'm not condoning this, but it's interesting to see these things and why this feels like a victory over a corrupt system.
Yeah, she wants, like, I guess my my first reaction is like she wants to have her cake and eat it too,
Hmm.
right? She wants to celebrate the assassination of a CEO, and I guess, yeah, he was related to the healthcare industry, but th like it's just plain evil. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it we're celebrating murder here, and we shouldn't do that in any regard. And it's like
Yes.
on this at the same time, I understand that healthcare is a particularly nasty topic,
Hmm.
um, especially in the US where we have private healthcare and for-profit healthcare. But to to celebrate, like to dance on someone's grave, it's like that's just, and I'm not saying that she is,
Right.
but just just any celebratory feeling at all to the news just feels icky to me. So,
Yes. And I would say that and I'm going to come back to this, but there's this type of argument where the assumption is because the private industry is for profit, by definition, it's greedy. Whereas if you have government, which is doing something, it's altruistic because it's not for profit, even though you could have incredibly corrupt and greedy politicians. And this feeling, which I'm going to dispute later on in this video, but this feeling that this healthcare system or this company, this corporation has more power over you and you can't do anything to change that than, say, government policy, people feel, I think they have a visceral reaction. So this is more visceral rather than logical, that I can vote in my elections and therefore I have a say in government, but I don't vote for the CEO, which I think is false because every time you buy something from somebody, you're voting for them in the private industry. But the point being, because they feel that they don't have that power, therefore violence is justified. That's kind of the argument that she's making. That's the argument that a lot of people are making about this.
mhm. Yeah, and I think you can compound that with, you know, nasty things happen related to healthcare. And I'm not saying
Mhm.
nasty as in nefarious by like bad actors. I just mean when you're dealing with life and death,
Yes.
some people are going to live and some people are not. That's just the nature of the beast with healthcare. And so when you combine what you were just saying, these feelings related to, oh, that guy has $1 billion,
Hmm.
I have pennies in the bank, and then you combine that with being denied, like you applied um, for your health care to cover this medical cost, and they
Right.
denied it, and it's like, who are you trying to help here? I definitely see where those feelings come from, but then to celebrate murder.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we'll get back to this video because they're about to challenge that. It sounds like you are kind of celebrating murder.
Okay. So do we, so with that, do we want to continue playing?
Let's do it.
Um, okay. And then hopefully the buffering, hopefully it's solved by letting things load a little bit here. Okay, let's go.
And I know you later in the day you said, look, what I want here is a campaign of peaceful letter writing to these CEOs. But the statement, and I'm just want to put it up there one more time and see if how you feel about it, because this is the one that did sound like you were calling for violence. You said, and people wonder why we want these executives dead.
Yes, people do.
Them dead, and I guess
I mean,
that's
look, I'm gonna say I'm with the people in the sense that if you have watched a loved one die, because those systems would suffer the same fate as your loved one. And
Oh goodness.
Goodness.
millions of people across America have
I was going to say you can lower the quality if you need to.
had this experience. So yes, am
Yeah, let's
I, when I say, do I wish someone,
I know it's not gonna look as good. Well, it seems like it's already low quality.
240,
Did it
baby.
say it was already 360?
It did.
What is going on?
I don't know.
I have we haven't had this issue before. It,
I
it seems
know.
like I'm struggling here just to load a video. I don't know, man. Okay, let's I guess
Let's
let's
try
just go.
240. Oh, you just want to do 144? 240. Here we go.
Yeah, it's not gonna look as good, but
Yeah.
if you just listen with your ears,
Yeah. Let's scroll it back a
which is
little
what
bit
you
more.
always
Yeah.
dead,
do.
is that advocating for them to be killed? No, of course not. But am I going to shed tears or have a lot of empathy for somebody that has facilitated the deaths of thousands of innocent Americans through intentionally denying them coverage? I am not going to, weep over it. I do think that loss of life is a tragedy. I'm very against death generally, as a principle. But I think again, why do we mourn certain deaths and condone other deaths of innocent, vulnerable people?
Yeah, I get that. From a different angle, when you look at this, do you think his death,
we should say his murder.
his murder,
which is different from dying from an illness, which
Right.
is
And
horrible and should not.
I would say United Healthcare has murdered people, just to be clear. I would say United Healthcare
Okay.
has murdered thousands of Americans by denying them coverage, life-saving coverage.
and by the way, I get your point. I do get your point on that. Do you think that his murder, Brian Thompson's murder, is a good thing in terms of what it's done to bring all of this to the forefront?
I don't think, here's the reality. This is something that is clearly affecting millions of people's lives. It has made the media and politicians pay attention. I think it's a tragedy that a murder is what is forcing people in power to pay attention to this issue that is affecting everyone's lives. Again, one CEO shouldn't have to be murdered for them to care about the murder of tens of thousands of other innocent Americans, right? That should be national news as well. So yeah, I would love if it was not a murder. I would love if we just had a more just system and politicians and the media paid attention to the violence that happens every day at the hands of these insurance companies.
Do you view this almost like a
So I want to just jump on that because right now what she's doing, she's equivocating between an actual assassination and then denial of coverage, which you don't have to say the denial of coverage and how United Health does that is justified. But to say that it's the same thing, to equivocate between those two things, I think is disingenuous and just wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she's saying that the healthcare system is complicit in the deaths of people as a result of a lack of healthcare coverage,
Right.
which I'm not sure is actually, well, Sylvie, correct me if I'm wrong, but even if you don't have healthcare coverage, you can still get medical. I mean, obviously it would be you're paying just completely out of pocket at that
Yes.
point.
You would
But
be massively in debt. You would be in arrears, which means you'd have to pay the stuff off. You definitely would have a ruined life, but they don't say before we do the operation, we're going to run the credit card to make sure that this happens.
yeah, yeah. So it's like that's obviously this because even within the system of healthcare coverage, I know a lot of people end up in massive debt because something is horrifically expensive to begin with, and even what you're left with after coverage, you still can't really pay back. Or your cover or your insurance didn't cover it, right?
Yes.
So then it's still you're like, well, I've got to live.
Right,
So
right.
I'm going to do it, right? And then you just end up with debt anyway, even though you did have insurance. So, um, yeah, I mean, she definitely has a point about, and we kind of hit on it earlier. there's definitely issues with the insurance coverage system. But then, like you said, to equivocate that with I'm going out to New York or whatever city it actually I think it was New York or
New
whatever
York City.
city it
Yeah.
actually happened in, and I'm going to take this weapon and I'm going to murder you, you know, that uh it doesn't really track.
Yeah.
So,
So this last part though is very interesting because she's, I think at this point, going to deny I'm not for this, but you say we. So have
okay.
her final response.
Okay.
Revolution, where sometimes, there is that kind of collateral damage, which may be the death of some of these people. But are you viewing this kind of like a revolution?
I think a lot of people online are. I think that's deeply concerning because, again, we don't want a violent revolution in this country. We want nonviolent change. We want systemic change. Now, often systemic change only comes through violence when you look historically. However, it is about to be 2025. We have the internet. I do think that the internet gives people a voice. And I think hopefully the media and people in power can look at this outpouring of sentiment and see, this is a problem in society. This is something we should address before we see further violence, because we don't want violence. We don't. The insurance system is violent enough. We want to stop violence here, and we want to save lives.
All right. Wow, this is fascinating. This is just the reaction has just been fascinating, and you never disappoint, Taylor.
You're always starting a conversation,
I want
an
to get
important
people
one.
talking about these issues.
Well, you have.
Yeah.
Mission accomplished.
Thanks, Taylor.
Taylor, thanks as always.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. I did not expect this morning
There's
that
different
it would take this
there's the
turn.
conversations. She's right about the reactions, but there is also more conversation about what's
Healthcare.
happening in healthcare.
Absolutely.
And that's the end of the video. I think she may have had that asked earlier when we were having issues with the video, but they say, well, you say we want this. Isn't that you? And she's like, no, I just feel for what people are saying.
Yeah, I think she said that
Mhm.
in the last segment after
Yeah.
the first pause.
Yes. I will say she's not just unapologetically saying gun down everybody you want, but I've also heard that there are times where she's joked about more CEOs to go, and I think there's some disingenuousness to this. Even if we take what her interview at face value, there's this disingenuous nature, and part of it comes from red team versus blue team, where if you'll remember a couple years back, Paul Pelosi, who's the husband of Nancy Pelosi, who's one of the top leading Democrats, got hammered in the head. And this was treated as almost an act of domestic terrorism. And you could argue, well, I see the frustration that there's a corrupt system. And now this is beginning a conversation about how politicians become rich from insider trading and from all of the inside deals that they do. This is going to help us weed out corruption. But no, you didn't get that. You got, oh, Republicans' rhetorical words and their fiery rhetoric has caused this act of violence. And I'm sure if we asked Taylor Lorenz that question, do you feel the oppressed people rising up against the Pelosi's is the same kind of thing? She would say no. And there would be a myriad of reasoning that she would use. So she'd use a lot of rationales, but I don't know if she'd be rational while doing it. But yeah, just the kind of deep hypocrisy of the red versus blue team. This benefits the narrative of my team, and therefore it's justified.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what else to say. Like, my reaction this entire time of just seeing the news and yeah, I had seen some reactions online of people
Mm-hmm.
you know, celebrating and then people like, why are you celebrating? Um, and yeah, I mean, I would just say like, personally, just from the Christian perspective, it's like even to celebrate the death of somebody is just horrific.
Hmm.
Um, and you would hope that in our modern society we wouldn't have to come to that. And there was a comment that she made that, I don't necessarily want to read too far into, but she was like, yeah, I hope that we can come to a peaceful solution before, like, without further violence, where the assumption is um, further violence could definitely happen.
Yeah.
Presumably, the assassination of other big figures in the healthcare space. So, yeah, it just baffles me a little bit. And then, I mean, I, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I'm just at a loss for words a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, where I guess like my reaction to this, like, so unfortunately, I have less understanding of how insurance operates. Um, Fortunately, I have employment and they
Hmm.
provide very good coverage. So you know, I have coverage, great. And I'm a young male, so I don't really need the coverage.
Right.
Uh, so also great. But um, yeah, just this idea, you sort of brought it up earlier that so we live in a for-profit society, not in the sense that society is trying to profit off the people, but
Right.
all of the institutions um, that we interact with are for profit.
Right.
Pretty
We
much. I
have
mean, obviously
private versus
you have
state-run industries. Like
yeah,
that's
yeah,
another way to say that is, if you don't like capitalism, that word sticks in your throat. We have a system where you have independently, privately owned businesses that run functions that in other countries the government runs.
yeah, yeah, and it's this idea that because you're making money, you
Hmm.
have to be ripping someone off.
Yes, that's yes.
Yeah, so it's like, oh, because United Healthcare is making money, that means they are definitely ripping people off. They look at this case and they say X, Y, and Z issues that you have are too expensive, and we're not going to cover you because we would lose money. Like
Yes.
literally, if you were able to if you had the evidence to make the claim as she did that United Healthcare is murdering people, United Healthcare would not be in business.
Yes. Yes. So she can't literally mean murder, but she's saying their actions cause death and unwellness. And because they're for profit, they could have less profit and do more for other people.
Hmm.
Now, granted, like we have that mindset that if you're making any profit and there's any suffering that you haven't mitigated, then you are evil and you're somehow getting that gain through dishonest means. But you're right. We never say that. If you go to Canada or the UK and they deny you coverage, that's just the way reality is. Tough luck. Like we have this different model because it's politicians versus it's the private industry. And I think viscerally that feels right because somehow I participate in my elections. If a government agency or public servant does something wrong, well, I can vote them out in a year or 4 years or something like that. But if it's a CEO, I can never vote them out, which is kind of ignorant
Well,
when you think through it. Because listen here, like,
publicly traded companies, isn't the CEO like beholden to like the stockholders? Like can't
yeah, to the
yeah.
shareholders, but not to you as the individual who maybe pays for the system. But
Right. And you made a good point earlier
yeah,
where so if we combine those two, so yes, if you're a privately owned company, you're going to have a board, and that board will have the power to put into place a CEO and perhaps
Hmm.
other leaders. Um, so I guess that's somewhere where you can, as a private individual, you can choose to spend your money there or not. But then if
Right.
you're publicly traded, any person who has shares in the company can get onto earnings calls and
Yes.
they can vote, and your vote is weighted, I believe, often by the number of shares that you have. So
Yes.
yeah,
You can
the
buy
average
votes.
voter will not, but that's where
Yeah.
they you might hear in certain news coalitions of shareholders coming together to
Yes.
all make the same vote because individually they don't have the power, but collectively they have 20% in the company. You know what I mean?
And let's play
Uh,
this thought experiment. Is it easier to opt out of United Health, or is it easier to opt out of, let's say, when you had the mask and the vaccine mandates and all sorts of top-down government policies? Could you have resisted them more easily than you resist the CEO? If you say, I'm not going to pay taxes anymore because I don't like how you're telling me to do health, like you have big problem, big bone to pick with the health department and you refuse to pay your taxes, how's that going to work out for you? Versus if you leave your job, get new health insurance, or you change your policy or get out of your policy during the next open enrollment.
mhm.
Like you might say like that's unfair that there's enrollment periods, granted, but are you telling me that it is easier to opt out of government when they do the wrong thing versus this company? And it's just one
Yeah,
company of many.
yeah, yeah. And that's where, especially with someone like Taylor Lorenz, who, I don't
Mhm.
necessarily follow,
Yeah.
you know, yeah,
Only for the
I don't,
controversy.
like I don't follow her. I don't follow her Twitter account, her X
Hmm.
account. I don't see what she posts on the daily. But when she has a hot take that becomes popular or people are reacting to, I'll see it. And it's something like where I think even still on the cusp of 2025, she's still in favor of mask mandates,
Yes.
um, partly because uh, she has some kind of immune deficiency. So she sees it as a way to help her basically stay alive, if you will,
Right.
or at least that's the way she sees it.
Yes.
And that's where what you were saying, is it easier to opt out of government mandates, like top-down mandates versus private healthcare, where, as you point out, yeah, I could, during the open enrollment, I could change that. I mean, yes, you would be paying more because your employer would no longer be subsidizing part of the
Hmm.
cost. Like, I can go on and see like my employer, I think I forget exactly how much it is, but I think they pay almost $1,000 a month
Right.
into my health care, and then I pay a few hundred or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact numbers, but yeah, obviously healthcare is very expensive if you
Yeah.
don't have someone subsidizing it for you.
For sure.
But
And we're not saying that healthcare is not an issue.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
healthcare is definitely an issue. But then you combine it with this idea that Taylor Lorenz, I think, support, which is why I was talking, brought her back
Hmm.
into it. Um, th if there's any rule that could be put in place that would help any amount of people, it seems like they're in favor of it.
Right.
Or at least, so she's in favor of requiring everyone to wear masks
Yeah.
because there is a small fringe population that will benefit from everyone wearing masks. And
Right.
that's where the underlying principles of how we see society are just completely different. And I do say we in that, and that I'm
Yeah.
including myself, where yes, I fundamentally disagree with how she views the role of government. Um, where I think part of the reason that I'm an American citizen and in my adult years I'm still an American citizen is because I recognize that we have all of these different populations.
Hmm.
We have this constitution that sets up individual freedoms, right?
Yeah.
we have the ability to speak out against something that we personally see um, as a moral deficiency. Like if government does something and we disagree with it, we can speak out against it, and other people will speak out against us.
Right.
That's just like civil discourse. Whereas it seems like the modern liberal progressive movement is like, if you say anything or do anything that could be construed by anybody to be negative toward that person,
Yes.
you can't say it. And in fact, it's the government's responsibility to regulate that.
Right. You are causing harm or you're going to murder somebody through your
Right.
action or inaction.
Right.
And it's
And
just like, oof.
yeah, and exactly what you just said. Like if I make a comment about anything, like if I were to somehow make an offhand comment and an LGBTQ person was in the room and they heard that and they construed it, and then that person like catastrophized, I'm I'm trying to produce like the most negative thing possible. Not that I'm not claiming that I'm anti. I
Yeah.
probably put myself in the hornet's nest a little bit there.
Yeah.
But I guess my point is that that person catastrophizes and then they commit suicide. Um, Right. Obviously, there are a lot of issues there.
Yeah.
But basically what Taylor Lorenz is saying is, if anyone says anything negative, and if that negative thing could possibly lead to the death of someone, so in this case, it's healthcare always leads to death, let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
We just call that murder, right? And instead of investigating and making sure that United Healthcare is providing the best coverage to everybody, like I guess there's a lot of different things you can do, but it's just like if anything results in someone's death, that is murder, basically.
Right. But not for her. If somebody takes her words and they start killing more CEOs, she's not murdering people. She's
Right.
just engaging in free speech, which goes back to the red team versus blue team mentality, where it would be one thing if she were just consistent and she's like, yeah, hammer Paul Pelosi's head because they're corrupt and they lead to death and chaos and kill the CEOs. Like, I would respectfully disagree, but I would still have respect for somebody who's consistent and doesn't stick to just red team, blue team ideology.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's really
Yeah.
quickly
And
throw up the, sorry to cut you off, the graphic, and you can talk as you're doing that.
yeah, let me share this. Are you seeing? There we go.
There you go. Yes. So to be fair to Taylor Lorenz, who reposted this, as you can see at the bottom, United Healthcare had a claims denial rate of 32%. It just says based on available in-network claim data for plans sold on the marketplace. So we don't have the source for this graphic, but let's just assume for generosity's sake that that's true. And Taylor Lorenz is saying the worst offender is murdering people and they are guilty. It comes back to this idea of, is it easier to opt out of that and go to literally any other of the healthcare providers on this list than it is to opt out of, say, government? So let me give you the counter example. If I were to see somebody assassinate the Department of Homeland Security, who is, gosh, I'm blanking on his name now. But he's in charge of border security. And is he responsible for all the murders and all the crimes that take place because that's not working? The answer is no. And same thing if somebody were to murder a CEO for one of the, let's say, the vaccine producers. So they go and they whack somebody from AstraZeneca or one of the other people that produced a COVID vaccine because they felt that they led to an unjust system. Taylor Lorenz wouldn't agree with that. So strip away the red team, blue team type of mentality and really look at, can you opt out? Where is your agency? One of the things that I'll do when I work with clients is I ask, what can you control? Granted, you can't control what's going on. But do you have the right then to lash out like that? And I would say no.
Hmm.
Let me give you a final thought, Diddy, and then I'll give my final thought.
Yeah, we're short on time
Yeah.
here. Yeah, I think my final thought is um, kind of what I was getting at there at the end. It seems like the reactions that we're seeing are born out of just completely different worldviews. And my reaction is um, I value a world where we have choice and we have personal freedoms. And I think in order to make that happen, we have less government control in certain things, and that
Mhm.
certainly means private industries will take over. Um, so we can argue about whether the private industries are doing that well or not. That's a separate
Mhm.
argument, but I think fundamentally that is a result that results in a better system
Yeah.
than government control.
Yeah. And the name of the guy for Department of Homeland Security was Alejandro Mayorkas.
Okay.
Mayorkas. But yeah, basically that. Can you opt out? How can you opt out? And just be consistent. Realize when evil is evil, and killing that person is not the same thing as denying coverage. As bad as they are, that's just not the same thing. And like you said before, Diddy, that doesn't mean that they're on the operating table and they deny them coverage and they can't have the surgery. It does mean that they are saddled with lots of debt, which is not good, but it's a far cry from shooting somebody down in the street.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with that, we're going to conclude. If you'd like to see more videos like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, you can email us with ideas for articles and videos you'd like us to respond to. That's it for now. We hope to see you in the next episode.
See ya.